One of the greatest things you can do as a parent or a human being is to be a source of comfort for your children.
You're listening to the Resilient Caregiver podcast, a show that helps caregivers on the foster and adoption journey go the distance and not lose their minds in the process. Pull up a chair and join the conversation. Here are your hosts, Mike and Kristen Berry.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Resilient Caregiver podcast. We are so glad you have joined us for this episode. This is season 30, episode 291. And in this episode, we're going to be just throwing off the lid, blowing the top off on the holidays. I know, right? You're like, wait a second. It's October 13th or 14th or whenever you're listening to this. What gives? Why are we talking about the holidays? We're talking about the holidays, guys, because you know as a caregiver that the holidays can be overstimulation city. They can be the highlight, the spotlight on loss and grief and anxiety for our children. So what better time than right now to jump into this valuable topic? And in this episode, we are so excited to welcome in our good friend, Deborah Gray, who is a world-renowned attachment expert. She's the attachment guru. She joins us in this episode to talk about how we can effectively help our children navigate the holiday season. And when we say holidays, it's not just Christmas or New Year's or Thanksgiving if you're here in the United States. It's this month, October, Halloween, all the way through the new year, because you know as well as we do that this season, beginning with Halloween, going through Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's, just stirs up a lot of emotions for our children. And Deborah has some incredible wisdom to share with you in this episode. We're going to get to that in just a moment, but listen, because we're talking about this, we want to invite you guys, if you haven't done so already, to check out our holiday survival guide. These are 5 recordings, audio recordings that we did with trauma-trained therapists. It's a goldmine of insight and encouragement that will help you succeed if you visit thriveparents.org/holidays, or you click the link in our show notes. You can jump over and download that for free. And it's, like I said, treasure trove. We talk about how to process disappointment, how to help your child cope with unmet expectations, how to handle overstimulation, and how to create structure during the holidays. Big, big topics. It's yours for free. All you need to do is visit thriveparents.org/holidays to get that guide, or click the link in our show notes. And I also want to tell you that this coming Monday, October 16th, we are announcing something big. We're really excited about a big project we've been working on that we're going to roll out to you guys starting this Monday. And the way that you find out about that, the way that you're the first to find out is by being on our email list. And the way you do that is to visit resilientcaregiver.org and sign up. You can sign up for any of our free resources and you'll be on our email list. So make sure you do that. And also make sure you check out the work that we're doing over at Resilient Caregiver, resilientcaregiver.org. To learn more about this show, the podcast, visit resilientcaregiver.org/podcast. You can catch up on past episodes, subscribe to the show. And then, of course, if you throw a / and resources to that resilientcaregiver.org, you can learn all about our free resources we offer to help you thrive as a caregiver. We are so glad you are here with us for this episode. And now on with the show.
We love having Deborah on our show. We love to just have a conversation with Deborah. We are honored to call her a friend, and we especially love to talk to her around this time of year, and that is the holidays. I know that for most of our listeners, the holidays can be an exciting time and also a really difficult time. No matter how our children arrived in our families, often the holidays begin to trigger behaviors and thoughts and feelings that we didn't expect. Deborah, why is that the holidays tend to trigger those things in our families?
Well, if we think of our own expectations for the holidays, many of us have expectations that we're going to have some kind of a spiritually uplifting time. Maybe we're real fans of tradition, or we have some cozy little thoughts of what we expect to enjoy with our family under the Christmas tree. If you're Jewish and listening to this, maybe you're thinking a bit of how you'll celebrate Hanukkah. So those expectations mean that you're going to be including extra things. There's extra pressure on everyone for things to go right. That collides sometimes because we have kids who may be bringing grief loss issues in. And then when you include extra things, you have kids who are very easily overwhelmed by new things, unpredictable things. Those kids can start to feel like, I can't do this. This is too much. And then suddenly you come to a T in the road, like we need to stop and reconsider. So hopefully this will be a preemptive strike so that we can prepare before we hit that T in the road, so that there isn't a collision, but instead there's a happy celebration of the holidays for everybody.
I love how you say, well, I don't love how you say collision or use the word collision, but that's a really good mental image that I'm sure parents listening right now are thinking, oh my gosh, yeah, collision, explosion. Some parents have just they've really kind of been through hell and back in previous holiday gatherings or large family gatherings. And some people are probably looking at what's coming up here in the next couple of weeks thinking, I don't want to go through this, man. This is tough. You talked about expectations, and just that, the overstimulation of the season. So how can parents shift our own expectations so that the entire family can enjoy this season? I know that's a really big question. So I'm relying on you, Deborah, to tackle that and break it all down for us.
Well, I'm going to start just a little with parents, but I'm going to give a lot of things that I've provided for my clients that seem to help them out, or they've given me ideas that I picked up so that I can pass them on, to parents who are coming in the future. And so one of the things that works quite well is to interview your kids. Go to each one and say, hey, we're going into the holidays. So what are some of the things that you most enjoy? What are some things that you want to avoid? So for example, I talked to my kids one time, how many times would you like to go shopping? I realize this is the time of COVID, but two of my children said once. One said, I could maybe do twice. How long would you like to shop? Oh, maybe an hour or two. Oh, good to know. And so just those very practical assessments. How long could people last before they become overstimulated? That's important, and that's quite different for each member. You have children who have been prenatally exposed. Many of those kids get overwhelmed quite easily. They can also be sensory seeking, like, I like the stimulation, but then they end up wailing at the end of the time because they hit a hard stop. And so that's a little bit of, well, let's kind of figure out where we're going to enjoy something and where we're going to stop. So for example, if you have kids who are going to work on a project, say decorating the Christmas tree. Okay, many times the Christmas tree decoration, that has a certain expectation. Some parents really do want that angel to be centered on top. our family had an angel that seemed to want to list. So, our expectation was that we should get her on top of the tree. We ended up with a beam and a string that would keep her centered. Unfortunately, from some angles, it looked like she'd been hanged, so we ended up, with some expectations that we'd all have a good laugh over it. I'm only sharing this because you want to kind of think in terms of what's going to make a good story instead of what's going towards perfection. How can we all have a good time? But let me give some practical tips. How long are we going to work on the Christmas tree before we start to get grumpy with each other? So maybe we'll put the thing up, we'll work a half hour, and then everyone takes a break. Maybe we'll switch some of our schooling or our activities so that we move schooling more towards the end of the day, and we have everyone run outside during the light hours of the day. That way we have an hour or two of physical exercise during the daylight hours, which are so short, because our kids really need to get outside and exercise to stay well behaved. And we certainly could take advantage of that. The kids who are traumatized or anxious do better with structure. So lay out a schedule for the day. And I like to have projects, especially during time of COVID, that everybody can work on. So in other words, you order that kind of paper that comes in a roll from Michael's. Clean off a table, unroll a section. Everybody's got a piece of their mural they're going to work on. And you can roll out different days as they fill out, or you can roll out different parts. People can cooperate on, different sections of it, or they can have a separate section. And then those murals could be laid out along a wall, keep it low enough so the kids can see it, or they can be rolled up and sent to grandparents or relatives as gifts. But those are things that give kids things to do that center their mind. I also like the idea of not working all day on something. You probably gathered this from the Christmas tree, but kind of think of what are the activities we enjoy doing? Is it baking, traditional baking? Is it singing together? Is it watching a movie? I'm not going to give some of the ideas that we can't do this year because most of us are shut down. But if it's baking, often we'll bake such a long time that it becomes tiresome. So maybe we would say, we're going to bake, we'll mix up the dough one day, and then we'll do the cutouts that are stars today. Then we'll do the cutouts that are reindeer tomorrow. We'll decorate for a little while. But do you notice we're doing just enough? Maybe I can throw something out here. What we're finding is that for a lot of kids who have had neglect or they've had prenatal exposure, their wiring diagram isn't very detailed. And when I mean that, it means that the neural networks, that is the brain conduits or the brain signals, they aren't as complex as children who have had a more advantaged beginning. And so their ability to actually stay flexible, stay on task, and regulate themselves, that is, keep themselves under emotional control, it's just not as complicated. They have a simpler diagram. They have a little bit of stretch and then no more. So you want to stop while things are still having fun. I like to have reward systems in place that maybe will last for 2 or 3 hours. We're going to reward people for a quarter an hour for staying in a good mood and being positive and giving compliments. And if everyone can do that, we're going to double the reward. And that money can be used to buy your Christmas gifts for each other this year. And those types of reward systems help kids last just a little bit longer. If you have kids who have ADHD, keep in mind you have to give the brain a cookie. And that reward will keep them on track for longer. If you have things that are more complicated days, I set a timer and say, every 20 minutes, John, I'm going to give you a little break. We've set up a project in your room, and it's not to be mean or rough, but you can take a 10-minute break and work on the project. Take the timer with you. When it comes off, come on down, or when you're ready, okay? Or you can make it a longer period of time for a child who can maybe last an hour. But I like to get little timers that the kids can carry around if you have multiple kids in your family. Now, I've been giving a ton of suggestions here, but should we pass the ball and move to a new topic, or do you want to stay with this one?
So I definitely want to keep talking about these practical suggestions, but I do want to address first the parent that says, isn't that spoiling? If I say, let's do half of this project and literally have a cookie, or let's finish this and then we'll get to do something special. Is that spoiling my child? Shouldn't they just participate for the sake of being a part of this family? What would you say to the parent that is struggling with that idea?
It's a common question. And I do have to think, am I indulging the child? Am I rewarding every single thing that they do? And that's why I'm suggesting doing it for a shorter, higher risk period of time. But you're trying to meet children where they're at, not where you wish they were at. What's their frustration tolerance? So let's put it in another way. Do you want to be the parent who's the critical, nasty parent, who's always expecting more of the child than they can actually do? We want to keep our positives to negatives to children to a 7-to-1 ratio. And I often think most of the kids we're talking about have already lost more, have already suffered more than the parents have ever suffered in their lives. So what, you want them to suffer more, be more frustrated? We're trying to build frustration tolerance, not be the heavy hammer. And most of the people listening to this program are Christians. And I think of the verse in Isaiah when we're thinking of the prophecies for Jesus coming. And he says, in a bruised reed, I will not break. And I often think of his tenderness in our sore places or our hurt places. And so we're trying to cause the kids to be a little stronger in their weak places. Many kids' behavior problems stem from issues that have to do with their basic brain wiring. Basically, if we kind of think of the brain, the upstairs, downstairs brain, or the levels of the brain, lectures are speaking to a highly cognitive level, that is, reasoning level. And the problems are on a sub-reasoning level. Call it a subcortical level, okay? And so you're trying to meet that child just where they're at. Do you want your child to feel successful, positive, look forward to the holidays, feel that their parents treat them with tender compassion and bringing out their best, or not? And that comes back to just what's your view of child raising. Most of us want to be tender parents. We want to bring out the best in our kids and have them try hard for us, not give up and be disillusioned and yell. When parents are lecturing and yelling, kids are misbehaving, nobody's winning anyway.
Oh gosh, Deborah, we could listen to you all day long. Do you realize that? Like we could, we just need to get like your voice continuously on like a continuous track that we can play over and over again. I love listening to your explanations and listening to you share and equip the parents that are listening. So thank you so much for that. Now we know that this season, in fact, it's kind of a common thing that from October 31st all the way to January 2nd, that's kind of like the season we prepare as parents, because we know that this is going to be the season above any other season, really, that causes our kids to become overwhelmed, to become triggered, but then also to experience a lot of this loss and this grief that tends to rise to the surface. And I think it's just because, holidays, Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, it's all centered around family. And I think that our kids have lost, a lot of our kids have lost their first families. I think it brings up a lot of grief. A lot of struggles. I know a lot of parents deal with this. We get this question all the time from people that my child is they're in a depression from like the end of October all the way to January. So for the parent that's thinking, man, we're in the throes of this right now, and I don't know what to do. What are some practical ways that we can help our children who are experiencing this feeling of grief and this loss? What can we do practically as parents to navigate through this season with them?
Again, I really like to have a preemptive strike. And so for a lot of my kids, we'll sit down individually and say, of course, you're going to miss parents during this time. And often if kids are going to have trauma triggers, I want to know about them ahead of time so that I can start to think where they might be triggered. And this is just an aside, but a lot of relatives want eye-to-eye contact with kids after trauma for neurologic reasons. Eye-to-eye contact is very tough for them. Ask kids to have something to show grandparents that they can focus on instead of the eye-to-eye contact. Or if you have grandparents who are in the know, they can focus on something. Let me show you this picture, or let me do this. Okay, that's just an aside. But moving on. So if they have siblings in foster care, so we're going to get a jump on that. And if we're going to have visits, we'll have that done the first 2 weeks of December. And then if we don't have a visit then, we won't do that until after the first of the year. I have a child whose mom is mentally ill, and this is not unusual for me on the streets. And so it's like, of course, you're going to wonder about your mom on Christmas. So what can we do? So who's likely to serve meals to homeless people? Well, let's make a donation to that group. Or let's send a card to that group that can be posted. Because if she doesn't come there, she's likely to come to a similar place. She might even hear about it. And it's a way that we can take care of that compassionately. One of the greatest things you can do as a parent or a human being is to be a source of comfort for your children. That place that they can come to and just have their burden shared and feel a little bit better. We don't want our kids to be alone in it. So when our kids are angry, sometimes you can say, I hear the anger, but that seems like a lot more anger than just the situation. And it does make me wonder if you might be angry or really missing some people who were first parents in your lives, or brothers and sisters, or if you're worried. Or maybe some pictures are coming in your head of some really sad things or scary things that happened in the past. There's a lot of drinking over the holidays. And so many of our kids have, you put up the Christmas tree and they remember some pretty bad things that happened during that time. And so those are things that you really want to get, a heads up on early. And it's like, well, how can we give a different feeling about the Christmas tree. You know, so sometimes I'll do before and after pictures, you know, sometimes we'll get some extra therapy ahead of time for that. Those are very important things to say. And then I like to have some jokes around family resemblances that foster and adopted children don't have. And so when you say, yes, the bio children are going to hear how, why, you've got Aunt Elsie's eyes, or you look just like your mother. You can say, frankly, she doesn't have Aunt Elsie's nose, and that's a good thing, you know. And yes, you might feel a little left out, but it's not always the worst thing. You know, and if you can kind of think of some of our family trees, I have some real characters perched in mine. And so, you know, sometimes being genetically not related isn't such a bad thing. Having a little bit
exactly.
of levity over that, not so bad. We have an infamous story in my family. You know, my grandmother got ski masks for everybody, and my dad had it stuck on his nose. You know, and she's like, don't cut it off. We want to take it back and get our money back. And my dad's like, cut it off. I'll pay. You know, so, you know, so some of the people in my growing up family who weren't adopted were feeling just fine about this, not having my dad schnoz. So, you know, it doesn't take away the hurt all the way, but it can help. And you can give a heads up to some of the relatives. Why don't we talk about the family characteristics and qualities that we want to be carried through the family? You have the kind ways of your mother. I can see her voice tones. You have learned to set the table just like so-and-so. How nice that you've got that flair for the beautiful. You've got an artistic sense. You know, we haven't had a lot of that in the family. Wouldn't addition. Try going that direction. You know, the family of God always has had people who have been grafted in, and it's a good thing. It's God's idea. So anytime you can talk about the characteristics of families that are qualities of character rather than qualities of physical resemblance, it's a good idea.
I was thinking actually, as you were talking about a mutual friend of ours, Ruth Graham, who lives there in the Seattle area where you're at. We've had her on the podcast before, and she talked about paying attention to the little things that could become, you know, the bigger things. And I always remember her saying this. I think about this every time. This has been like 2 or 3 years since we had this conversation, but she talked about like paying attention to things like even like the scented candles that you burn, you know, that could dredge up a memory, that could dredge up a thought in our kids that cause them to melt down or cause them to become triggered. So paying attention to those little things, responding with compassion and kindness. Yeah, I think absolutely. You know, this is such good encouragement for our parents listening in right now.
I love Ruth Graham's wisdom. But you notice that a lot of our things are coming back to what's the source problem. One of my clients said that she and her husband, you know, had a computer business. And when something started to glitch, they didn't just want to fix it so it didn't pop up on the screen. What's the source problem? And so when our kids start to get, you can see it. They start moving in a jerky way. They make noises like that. You can see that they're disengaged and getting kind of snotty. And a lot of times we give them a warning look, which only adds to the frustration. And if you can instead say, let's step back and figure this out. You know, if you're in the middle of something, you can say, John, take 5. I'll be with you in a minute. But have a protocol. When this starts to happen, we want to get to the source of the problem. Now, sometimes it's just jealousy. You smiled at Jeannie more than you smiled at me. I did my best on a star and it only had 4 points and hers had 5. I felt jealous. Well, you can get rid of that and a hug and a kiss and you're good to go, or just like, reminding them of their better self. But if it's a trigger, then you can do something about that. I like to give kids a signal too if they hit a trigger. They can put kind of like, I need a minute, like I'm putting up a T for Mike here in the video, but it's a quick trigger because many kids don't want to talk about it in front of everybody. And those are good things to know about with the kids, because many times you're going to consequence that kid because it's like, I have had it. This is enough. And then you find out what triggered it. And it's like, if only I'd known, I would have intervened much, much sooner. But with the loss things, you're also not wanting to just be on the negative end. You want to be, well, why don't we make it so that you aren't triggered every year? And we think of 2 or 3 memories that we want to start adding to your positive memories. If I'd say the field has one kind of unopened gift, it would be the gift of new memories. It would be the gift of more positives that we can add. So sometimes we take off some of the things that are pressuring kids and just say, we're going to take a holiday from those so that we have time to add some new things. So Yahoo, we aren't going to do math from the 15th of December till January 5th. And in its place, we're going to add and then add something positive. If you're in a snowy area, we're going to have a snowball fort, that we comprised. We're going to have forts that are opposing and snowball fights that last at least 3 snowy days. I'm just making this up as I go along.
Right.
But come up with things that really pique their interest. And I do like to have a theme of the day, an activity of the day, something that's predictable, but add in a bunch of fun things so that the house gets to be a fun place. Or promote a pajama day. Everyone, let's get your most comfortable pajamas and nighties out. We're going to stock up. Nobody goes to the store. It's going to be games day. We're having pancakes, cereal all day, no cooking, everybody into nighties and pajamas. We're going to have our picture taken. If you want your picture taken, you don't, you hold the camera. We'll have chutes and ladders from 9 to 11. We're going to do, some other game later in the day. But these are really fun memories that then you're adding. I mentioned before the wiring diagrams too simple. Sometimes the way to make more flexible kids is they want to hold on and make that wiring diagram that's more complex because they're trying so hard to stay with the activity. And that actually promotes some neural growth, a lot of play. Or we are all putting on coats from 1 to 2 every day, and we'll be outside playing. We're going to have your IEP changed so during those Zoom school days, you have recess. So, but you notice how we're working it. And that just makes for a much more positive environment. Also, as parents, a lot of times because of our fears that our kids are going to grow up and have a bad situation or not develop certain character qualities, we're looking to catch every negative thing. But we've actually found out with kids with ADD or kids who have some kind of other developmental problem that they change more when we're noticing the positives. So we want to do a lot of that, noticing the positives for them.
So that kind of leads back into something that you said earlier, which was interviewing your kids. You actually gave this advice. I don't know if it was just you and I talking, or maybe we were on a webinar together, but I took that advice to heart, and that was addressing what my own expectations as the caregiver are about the holidays, and then addressing what the expectations are for my kids, especially my grown-up kids. We had experienced a couple Christmases where, in my mind, I had envisioned baking cookies together, my grandkids coming over. We were all going to decorate the Christmas tree. We were all going to open presents at some point. And then I felt disappointed because my grown-up children did not have the same expectation for the holiday. They felt disappointed because they had other expectations they had created in their mind, but I wasn't meeting them, and neither one of us knew. So as our kids are growing up into their teenage years, their young adult years, what are some ways that we can stay engaged with our kids while they're also breaking away and creating their own adult life?
I think that's such a good point, because when you have children of various ages, often you're parenting around special needs for certain children, but you have kids who are having children, your grandchildren, and they basically want you to only dote on those grandchildren. And so you can have certain hours that are intergenerational, but it's completely appropriate to say, we're going to spend Christmas Eve afternoon with the grandchildren, break away and come over to your house. And that's going to be our celebration. That way, I will be wholly focused on your children. String things out over a series of days. And so that way, everybody's having that sense of, I'm special, I'm getting the kind of really intimate connection that I want. It also is very difficult to be in a playful, resonant place when you're trying to work with a child who's extremely dysregulated and prone to tantrums. So you can also pass the baton. Would be like, Kristen, I'm going to be from 8 to 10 on Christmas morning. This would be Mike speaking, kind of riding herd on Sally. And then how about you take 10 to 12? And then how about Sally takes a break in her room for an hour from 12 to 1? And, then we're all going to, and it's not, you're not going to be together, but that way, if somebody needs to take the person out, you don't have both parents overlapping. You have one parent who keeps the continuity going for the rest of the family. It's also fine to get a caretaker in to help you out. So I've had families who get a paid person to come in for part of the holiday season, and they pair up so that they maybe take a person to do an activity. This can be a volunteer, or it can just be kind of an obliging teen paid for babysitting rate. For some of the children who have more difficult behaviors, we've been able to get a special needs caregiver in. And that person basically acts as a source of emotional balance and regulation for the special needs member. Some families have more than one, but I'm speaking especially for a person who's likely to be disruptive. But you're looking in kind of a fearless way, what do we really need here?
That's such great advice, and really does lead us to our last question, which is, what are some ways that we as caregivers can stay regulated during the holidays?
It's a wonderful question. One, make sure you get more sleep, not less. Actually, make a list of everything you intend to do for the holidays and put a timeline down. when will you get that done? Is it able to be scheduled? Now imagine that you have a child who blows out and several get sick. Reduce back. Then reduce back for yourself if you get sick. So basically, take things off your list so that you have yourself about halfway committed. You can always add in extra things, but things always come up. And so you want a really nice fat margin. Put a zipper on your mouth. And if somebody asks you something that you can do, zip the zipper and say, I will get back to you in 24 hours. Do not allow yourself to say yes. Think rationally after. And never say yes to something before checking in with the family member who's going to pick up the burden if you say yes, because it's somebody else in the family who's going to pick up the slack, and they will not have holiday cheer when it gets to be too much. It's going to be kind of a grim conversation about that. I know I sound kind of grim myself, but being kind of a golden retriever, overdoer, we've had some conversations like this in the past. But then kind of think of, I'm going to need more sleep. I really have to pay attention to good food. I'm going to have some forgiveness for myself because I'm going to forget something. Something's not going to happen well for me. I like people who are parenting to take time off to themselves. And if you're already going to the holidays tired, take 3-hour breaks 3 times a week. That's just for you, where you're not reachable. Don't let your cell phone be turned on, and just go take a break. And those breaks are really going to be refreshing from you. Some people spoil it. They take their phone because they're afraid disaster is going to strike while they're gone. But see, they're still on high alert. You want to leave your phone behind, and then just take 3-hour breaks a week. That means often you have to get childcare in, or you have to drop some kids off at grandma's house or a neighbor's. Try to get some COVID buddies who are also most social isolating, but don't try to do it by yourself. And then I like to have a gripe buddy. I pay a therapist who stays regulated to just listen to me talk sometimes. She can show none of her skills because I don't let her get a word in edgewise. Sometimes I just need to talk to somebody. I'd strongly suggest it. I don't go in for counseling every week, but during the holidays, I increase my access to this person. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a therapist. It could be somebody in your church who's a lay counselor, or somebody who can hear you process. The thing is, you're taking information out of active memory that's very tagged with emotion. And in talking it through, you're processing it, and then you can put it away. And then somebody cares for you.
Yeah, that's good advice, because I think that a lot of parents, especially with that self-care piece that you're talking about, they think we've had lots of these conversations where parents will say, but I have so much to do. I have to go. I have to stay up until 2:00 in the morning to make sure that these presents get wrapped, and this gets done, and this gets done, and this gets done, and they're burning the wick at both ends, and they're running out of gas. And the reality is that's not how you stay regulated. You will not stay regulated by trying to burn through a checklist, and work to accomplish this mountain of tasks. So I think that's really, really good advice. Just very poignantly, take a break, get some sleep, eat healthy, pay attention to your own needs. Now, as we wind this down, first of all, this has been amazing. We love talking to you, Deborah, always and forever. but especially during COVID. So I just have one last question for you. This is the hot seat question, if you're ready for this one. All right. We ask all of our guests this. So, it's COVID-19, it's the COVID-19 era. We're heading into the winter. Gosh, that's like filling people full of dread, I'm sure, as they hear me say that. But especially during COVID and all this extra time at home, our listeners are always looking for new show recommendations, like a Netflix show, or new book recommendations. I don't know if you're a big Netflix or Hulu or Disney Plus like we are, but my question is, all right, what are you watching on TV and what are you reading right now that you could say, hey, I think this is a great show and this is a really good book?
Oh, I'm afraid you have talked to the wrong person on this.
Well, that's okay.
Okay. I do love to have children's books out. I love Madeleine L'Engle's children's book. I enjoy anything that, Tolkien has written, and the movies around Tolkien, the Narnia stuff, any of that's fun. But as far as more modern things, I'm afraid I'm not up to speed on that. That's going to be
well.
bad.
That's wise.
And actually, some of our animals, our pets, I don't know, we have 1 million animals on this very small farm, are named after characters from A Wrinkle in Time, all from books. My dog growing up was
we've got some
named
Lord of the
Pippin,
Rings too, right?
Gimli, So anyway, C.S. Lewis.
No, Deborah,
so we try we pay our tribute to all our favorite authors by naming a donkey or a chicken after them or something. So
it's so fun. We would dress up our animals for the holidays. This was started by kids who were poorly supervised.
That's awesome.
But it's actually been pretty fun, to dress up the animals for the holidays, and just anything that causes your family to be more upbeat and playful. You're going towards. Can I come back for a minute and talk about families who are wrapping presents till 2 a.m. and so forth? Often
Totally.
people who are overworking have a critical voice in their head. And that critical voice is, you aren't doing it right unless you do this. You're not doing it enough unless you do this. And so we want to have a secure attachment voice to ourselves. And that secure attachment voice is, I am realistic. This is the new reality. And you want to be that positive, loving parent as much of the time as you can, or enjoy the kids' growing up years as much of the time as you can. If you have a critical parent, you want to have something to say back to that parent. It's not always the conversation that's the same for one person to the next, but the conversation is something like, Mom, I really appreciate, or Dad, or sister-in-law, mother-in-law, how hard you work to make the holidays great. I've had to take a different path to make happy holidays for our family. I hope you can understand that we've taken a different path, but we hope to still make the holidays rich in love and tradition as you try to. Now you're honoring parents, but at the same time, you're gracefully defending yourself. It's a peaceful resolution to that conversation. Now you may still have a parent who's like, well, I still don't understand. It's like, I know, but moving on, it's time for dinner.
I think that's
Such great
perfect.
advice.
Thank you so much. Our parents, our listeners are really going to find so much value in this conversation. Deborah, as always, thank you for taking the time to talk with us.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Resilient Caregiver Podcast, courtesy of the Resilient Caregiver. Learn more by visiting www.resilientcaregiver.org.